When someone vanishes from your life, or when you decide to quietly step away from theirs, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. A silence settles in, a silence that doesn't feel like nothing, but rather like a presence of its own. That sudden emptiness is not a void. It's a mirror. It reflects back everything that once was, and in doing so, it magnifies your value. For the person left behind, this can be profoundly unsettling. They might not recognize it immediately, but the absence you create becomes its own kind of voice, echoing louder than any words you ever spoke. Human beings grow accustomed to what feels steady. When someone is always available, always present, they start to fade into the background of daily life. Not because they aren't valuable, but because consistency becomes invisible. Then, when that constancy disappears, it's like a familiar light flickering out. The room looks the same, but it feels different. Colder, darker, uncertain. That change forces reflection. It sparks curiosity. Where did she go? Is she happy? Was I taking her for granted? Men, like anyone else, can be surprised by the intensity of that shift. While he may initially greet the silence with relief or distraction, the stillness gradually starts to work on him. Without your voice, your presence, your warmth, and your quiet encouragement, he begins to notice what's missing. His mind drifts to old conversations, shared moments, tiny rituals you both created without even realizing. And slowly, he begins to piece together a truth he didn't want to face. Life without you feels different. Not necessarily worse in every way, but undeniably altered. Less vibrant, less anchored, less whole. In the beginning, he might convince himself he's fine. He may fill his time with friends, hobbies, or new connections, trying to blot out the outline of what's gone. But distraction only works for so long. When the noise dies down and he's left alone with his thoughts, the memory of you comes rushing back. This isn't about punishment or manipulation on your part. It's about human nature. Distance amplifies perception. It casts a spotlight on what once blended into the background. In that illumination, your worth becomes visible, perhaps for the first time in a long time. Stepping back also creates an energetic statement. Without a single word, you're signaling that your life doesn't revolve around another person's whims. Your silence says, I respect myself enough to reclaim my space. This quiet self-possession is magnetic. It's rare. It's intriguing. Because so many people cling or chase when they feel someone slipping away. Your decision not to do so stands out as an act of strength. That shift, your nonchalance, your independence, sparks a desire in him to understand what's changed and why the connection he once counted on now feels out of reach. This space you create is not just a pause, it's an opportunity. While he's reflecting on your absence, you're free to refocus on yourself. You reclaim your energy. You invest your time in your own growth, your own joy, your own priorities. The paradox is that the more you grow in that space, the more radiant your energy becomes, and the more noticeable the difference between your presence and your absence. He's not just remembering who you were, he's confronted with the possibility of who you're becoming without him, and that can be even more compelling. Absence doesn't merely leave a gap, it reshapes the emotional terrain. It forces him to reevaluate how stable life felt when you were part of it. Stability is something most people don't articulate but deeply crave. In a world of constant change and uncertainty, the steady presence of someone who genuinely sees and supports you is like an anchor. When that anchor is pulled up, the drift can be disorienting. He might not admit it out loud. He may not even have the language for it. But internally he starts to feel the imbalance more acutely with every passing week. Think of the small ways you shaped his days. The way you celebrated even his minor victories. The way you listened without judgment. The way you calmed him when life felt chaotic. Those gestures might have seemed ordinary at the time, but they were woven into the fabric of his stability. Without them, the fabric unravels a little. In their absence, the contrast is stark. This contrast is what awakens his appreciation, not a lecture, Not a confrontation, simply the lived experience of life without your support. Silence is powerful precisely because it's unforced. You aren't trying to prove a point. You're simply choosing yourself. You're saying, through your actions, I will not be overlooked. My energy, my love, and my presence are valuable. That declaration, silent but firm, reverberates louder than any argument ever could. It forces him to confront the reality of his choices, to see what he may have undervalued. And often, this realization sneaks up on him during unexpected moments. A song, a photograph, a familiar scent, a place you once visited together. Suddenly, he's back in the memory, and the contrast between then and now becomes undeniable. Another quiet force at work during this period is mystery. Mystery is magnetic because it invites the imagination to fill in the blanks. When you step away, you stop supplying updates. You're no longer easily accessible. He can't predict your every move. This uncertainty ignites curiosity. He starts to wonder how you're spending your time, what new people you're meeting, what experiences you're having. That curiosity isn't superficial, it's tied to a deeper recognition that your life goes on without him and perhaps is even thriving. There's also a subtler, more internal shift happening. As days pass, he's not only noticing your absence, but reevaluating himself. The support and encouragement you gave weren't just kindnesses. They were catalysts. Without them, he begins to sense his own stagnation. He may find himself less motivated, less focused, or more easily thrown off balance. This can be a humbling realization. He starts to see how much he relied on your energy, not in a dependent way, but as a stabilizing influence that allowed him to grow. That realization isn't always comfortable, but it's powerful. This dynamic isn't about gender stereotypes so much as it's about human patterns. We all acclimate to the good in our lives until it becomes background noise. We all sometimes need contrast to recognize value, and we all feel the loss of emotional safety and genuine care when it's gone. In your case, stepping back isn't an act of cruelty. It's a boundary. It's a moment of choosing self-respect over chasing approval. That act alone redefines the dynamic between you, because it shifts the power back to where it belongs, within yourself. Boundaries, after all, are not punishments. They're declarations of worth. They're gates protecting something precious, your peace, your energy, your heart. When you hold those boundaries even in silence, you're teaching others how to treat you. You're also teaching yourself. The paradox is that healthy boundaries don't repel people who truly care. They attract respect. Over time, even someone who initially resisted your boundaries begins to understand them as a framework for genuine connection rather than a barrier. What makes this entire process transformative is that it's mutual. While he's grappling with the absence, you're evolving within it. He's reflecting, and you're rebuilding. He's seeing the contrast, and you're creating a new version of yourself. By the time he recognizes what's missing, you've already begun to embody the person you were always meant to become. Stronger, more confident, and less willing to settle for less than you deserve. That's the real magnetism. Not the memory of who you were, but the reality of who you're becoming. In this way, absence doesn't just reveal your worth to him, it reveals it to you. It affirms that your energy is finite and valuable. It shows you that your presence is not a given, but a gift, one you choose to share with those who honor it. This recognition is liberating. It changes how you see yourself, how you move through the world, and what you will or will not accept from others. And because energy is contagious, that self-respect radiates outward, altering the way others perceive and respond to you. As he starts to understand the depth of what he's lost, he's also confronted with a choice. He can either grow into someone who honors the value of what you bring or retreat into distraction and denial. Either way, your silence has done its work. It has forced reflection. It has exposed truths. It has made clear that access to you is not automatic. And in that clarity, he can begin to see not only who you are, but who he needs to become if he wants to meet you at your level. This first stage of separation, then, is not just about missing you. It's about discovering the shape of the space you once filled. It's about realizing that what he took for granted wasn't just companionship, but stability, encouragement, and a mirror of his own potential. In your absence, he sees the contours of your impact, and those contours form a map leading him back, not out of convenience but out of recognition. Recognition of your value, recognition of the authenticity of your connection, recognition that what you offered was rare. As time stretches on, the space you've created begins to take on a life of its own. At first, it was simply quiet, an absence of messages, calls, and familiar rhythms. But slowly, that quiet transforms into a kind of mirror in which he begins to see himself more clearly. It's in the unfilled hours, in the moments when he would normally reach for his phone to share a thought or vent about his day, that the realization takes root. You are no longer there to provide the stability he once relied on. This is the hidden power of no contact. It doesn't force a decision or demand recognition. It creates the conditions for reflection. In that reflection, subtle truths emerge. Truths about how deeply your presence influenced his life. How much of his sense of balance was quietly tied to your steady support. He may not have appreciated it at the time because it was always there, but without it, the difference becomes stark. It's the emotional equivalent of oxygen, invisible until it's gone. Curiosity is the first spark. He wonders what you're doing, who you're spending time with, what your life looks like now. This curiosity begins as a simple thought, but it grows because it has nowhere to go. You aren't feeding him information anymore. There are no updates to scroll through, no new stories to interpret, no clues to decipher. The mind abhors a vacuum, and so his imagination begins to fill in the blanks. Sometimes it creates scenarios that are far from reality. But either way, it draws his focus back to you. Then comes reflection. He starts to recall the small things, the way you made his life lighter without demanding anything in return, the way you stood by him during hard times, and the way your energy elevated his own. He may feel flashes of regret, moments of nostalgia, or even pangs of guilt for not seeing your value sooner. This is not always a linear process. Some days he may feel defiant, convincing himself he's fine. Other days, the weight of your absence will be so palpable he can't ignore it. The oscillation itself is proof that the silence is working its quiet magic. The deeper impact, though, is on his sense of stability. People often underestimate how much a steady presence affects their day-to-day lives. When you're gone, the ripple effect can feel disorienting. He may notice he's less patient, less grounded, or more reactive to stress. These are signs that the emotional anchor you provided is no longer there. And as he grapples with this, he begins to see you differently. Not as a background figure, but as a foundational influence whose presence shaped the quality of his life. This is also the stage where he begins to compare, not out of malice, but because the human mind naturally seeks replacements for what it's lost. He may try to recreate the dynamic he had with you in new friendships or relationships, but it rarely works. He'll discover that while surface-level excitement is easy to find, the depth, understanding, and steadiness you offered are not. This comparison isn't about competition. It's about clarity. It's about him recognizing, perhaps for the first time, the rarity of what he had. While all this unfolds for him, something equally important is happening for you. The space you've created gives you time to heal, reflect, and rebuild your own life. You're not waiting in suspended animation. You're investing in yourself, new hobbies, friendships, opportunities, or simply a deeper connection with your own inner world. This growth isn't just therapeutic, it's transformative. With each passing week, your confidence strengthens. You begin to see your own worth not in terms of what you provided to someone else, but as an inherent truth that stands on its own. This self-rediscovery changes your energy. You become more grounded, more self-assured, and more magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because authentic self-confidence is naturally attractive. It's this shift that he feels even from a distance. He may not be able to articulate it, but he senses the change. The person he took for granted is no longer static. She's evolving, and that realization is both intriguing and unsettling, because it forces him to confront the possibility of losing you forever. One of the most profound aspects of this stage is how boundaries reveal their power. When you stepped back, you didn't just disappear. You drew a line in the sand, a quiet but firm declaration that you will not be overlooked, undervalued, or disrespected. This is not about creating a wall. It's about creating a gate. It's an invitation for him to rise to a higher standard. If he wants access to your life again, whether he consciously understands this or not, the message is clear. The old dynamic is gone. If he wants to come back, it has to be different. It has to be better. This is why your silence resonates so deeply. It's not the absence of communication. It's the presence of self-respect. It says, I know my worth, and I will not compromise it to keep someone else comfortable. This kind of quiet confidence is rare. Most people, when faced with loss, chase after what's slipping away. But you chose another path. You chose to trust that what's meant for you will not require you to beg or shrink yourself. And that choice leaves an imprint far deeper than any words could. As he continues to live without you, he also begins to confront parts of himself he may have avoided. Without your steady encouragement, he has to supply his own motivation. Without your listening ear, he has to sit with his own thoughts. Without your support, he has to face his vulnerabilities alone. This is uncomfortable but necessary. It forces growth. It's in this crucible of solitude that he begins to see not only who you were for him, but who he was with you. He starts to recognize the person he became in your presence. A calmer, more confident, perhaps even more ambitious version of himself. This recognition can be sobering. It challenges him to ask, if he wants that version of himself back, what does he need to change? How does he need to show up differently? This is where the possibility of his return begins to take shape, not as a reflex or a distraction, but as a genuine desire to re-engage with you from a place of greater awareness and respect. Meanwhile, your continued growth deepens the contrast. By the time he fully realizes what's missing, you're no longer the same person who left. You've evolved, expanded, and fortified your sense of self. This means that even if he does return, the dynamic cannot simply pick up where it left off. It must transform. It must rise to meet the new standards you've set, not just for him but for yourself. There's also a spiritual dimension to this stage. When you remove yourself from a situation where you were undervalued or taken for granted, you realign with your own inner compass. You step back into your own center. That alignment radiates outward, subtly shifting the way the world responds to you. Opportunities appear, people notice your energy, and life begins to flow differently. This isn't mystical. It's simply the effect of reclaiming your time, focus, and emotional bandwidth from someone who was draining it, without fully appreciating it. In a way, your absence teaches him about gratitude. Gratitude isn't just appreciation in words. It's a way of seeing. It's understanding the true cost and rarity of what you've been given. When you were always present, gratitude was harder to access because the gift felt constant. Now, without it, he can feel its value. And in feeling its value, he's confronted with the realization that he may have let something extraordinary slip through his fingers. As the weeks pass, this awareness deepens. He starts to notice not just the absence of your presence, but the absence of your influence. He may feel less inspired, less challenged, or less held accountable to his higher self. This is the moment when he understands that you weren't just a partner or a companion. You were a catalyst. Your presence pushed him to grow, to reflect, and to become more of who he wanted to be. Without that, the momentum stalls. All of these realizations build pressure. The silence that once felt like freedom now feels like a mirror, reflecting back his choices. The distractions that once seemed exciting now feel empty. The connections he tried to forge now feel shallow. It's in this atmosphere that he begins to consider reaching out, not as an impulsive gesture, but as a genuine acknowledgement of the void your absence has created and the growth it has inspired in him. For you, this stage is empowering. You're no longer sitting on the sidelines waiting for him to catch up. You're living your life. You're embodying your worth. And because of that, you're in a position of choice. If he reaches out, you're not obligated to respond. If he returns, you're not required to accept him back. The dynamic has shifted permanently. You hold the power to decide what, if anything, comes next. This is the quiet transformation that distance makes possible. It's not just about him missing you. It's about both of you seeing the truth more clearly. It's about dismantling old patterns, reevaluating old habits, and creating space for something new to emerge. And it all begins with the silence, the courage to step back, the patience to let the process unfold, and the self-respect to hold your ground even when it's uncomfortable. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the silence takes on a new shape. In the beginning it was a void, then it became a mirror. Now it has become a teacher. Both of you have been reshaped by its lessons, though perhaps in different ways. What once felt like a standoff has matured into something more balanced. A space where two people can see themselves more clearly and decide, with honesty, what comes next. For him, the internal tug-of-war reaches a breaking point. He's been through the denial stage, convincing himself he didn't care, that he could replace what you gave, that his life would move on uninterrupted. He's been through the nostalgia stage, flooded with memories of shared laughter, small gestures, and quiet comforts. He's been through the reckoning stage, forced to confront the role he played in losing you and the stability your presence provided. Now he arrives at the realization stage. Something has to change, and that change begins with me. This realization often comes quietly, not as a dramatic epiphany, but as a subtle shift in the way he moves through his days. He starts noticing the gap between who he was with you and who he's been since you left. He feels the discomfort of unfulfilled potential, of neglected responsibilities, of moments he could have handled with more care. He may begin making small changes, taking better care of himself, re-engaging with hobbies, reaching out to people he's neglected. At first, these changes are about self-soothing, but over time, they become about self-improvement. The absence of your energy has created a vacuum, but it has also created an opening. Without the emotional cushioning you provided, he's forced to develop his own resilience. Without your support, he learns self-support. Without your encouragement, he cultivates self-motivation. This is the paradox of loss. In losing you, he finds pieces of himself. And in finding those pieces, he begins to understand, on a deeper level, what you were offering all along. Not just affection, but a mirror for his highest self. During this same period, your own transformation accelerates. The longer you hold your boundary, the more confident you become in your ability to protect your energy. You start to notice subtle shifts. You speak up more easily. You take up more space in rooms. You make decisions without second-guessing yourself. You've stopped living in reaction to someone else's behavior and started living in alignment with your own values. This alignment feels like freedom, but it also feels like power, a quiet, grounded kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. Your relationships with others may also deepen during this time. Friends and family notice the change in you. Some may say you seem calmer, others may say you seem stronger. What they're sensing is your self-respect radiating outward. When you honor your own boundaries, you teach others how to treat you. This doesn't just affect your connection with him. It ripples through every area of your life. Your work, your friendships, your goals, your self-image. Meanwhile, from his perspective, the contrast between the before and after version of you becomes increasingly vivid. He may see glimpses of you online, or hear about you through mutual friends, or simply imagine how you've changed based on the energy you once shared. Each glimpse reinforces a single truth. You are no longer waiting for him. You've moved from longing to living. This is both alluring and intimidating. It forces him to confront the possibility that he might be left behind for good. At this point, his thoughts about reaching out become more serious. In the early weeks of silence, reaching out would have been impulsive, a way to soothe his own discomfort without addressing the deeper issues. Now, if he considers reaching out, it's because he's been humbled by the process. He's had to sit with himself, to own his mistakes, to recognize his patterns. This is the fertile ground from which genuine change can grow. If he contacts you now, it's not just to fill the void. It's because he's starting to see what needs to be rebuilt. It's important to understand, though, that his reaching out, if it happens, is not the end of the journey. It's merely the beginning of a new chapter. By the time he gathers the courage to contact you, you are not the same person he left. You've grown beyond the old dynamic. This means the power dynamic has shifted. You're not looking for him to validate you. You're not waiting for his apology to feel whole. You're standing in your own self-worth, evaluating whether his presence aligns with the life you're creating. This is where your discernment becomes crucial. Not every attempt to return deserves a response. Not every apology signals true change. The silence you've held was not a game. It was a sacred boundary. If he returns to you with the same behavior, the same lack of accountability, the same patterns of inconsistency, then nothing has changed. But if he returns with humility, clarity, and a willingness to do the work, then, and only then, can you consider whether a new dynamic is possible. And this is the real hidden power of no contact. It gives you time to grow strong enough to choose. When you first stepped back, you may have hoped he would come back. But now, after all this time, you're no longer hoping. You're choosing. You're deciding from a place of self-respect rather than desperation. This is what makes you magnetic. This is what makes him feel the shift so profoundly. Because deep down, he senses that you are not simply withholding. You are evolving. As you stand in this new version of yourself, you may also notice a shift in your desires. The person you thought you wanted may no longer fit the life you're building. The qualities you once tolerated may now feel intolerable. The goals you once shared may now diverge. This doesn't have to be sad. It can be liberating. Growth often reveals incompatibilities that were once hidden. By honoring your own evolution, you create space for relationships, romantic or otherwise, that match your new frequency. From a psychological perspective, what's happening here is simple but profound. You've moved from an external locus of validation to an internal one. You've stopped basing your worth on someone else's approval and started sourcing it from within. This is why the silence has been so transformative. It's not just about him missing you. It's about you finding yourself. And once you've found yourself, you can never go back to the old way of relating. For him, this stage is both the most uncomfortable and the most motivating. He now understands that if he wants to be in your life again, he can't just slip back in. He has to rise. He has to grow. He has to meet you where you are, not where you were. This is the crucible of true change. Some men will step up. Others will fall away. Either outcome is a win for you, because both outcomes reveal the truth. The beauty of this process is that it also heals the part of you that once settled for less. Each day you maintain your boundary, you rewrite your self-concept. You're no longer the person who gives endless chances without seeing results. You're no longer the person who abandons herself to keep someone else comfortable. You're the person who stands firm, who trusts herself, who believes in her own worth enough to walk away from anything that doesn't honor it. And as this new self-concept solidifies, you begin to attract different experiences. People who respect boundaries, opportunities that align with your values, environments where your energy is appreciated rather than drained. This is not a coincidence. It's the natural consequence of becoming the kind of person who lives by her own standards. At the deepest level, the silence has been about reclaiming your power. It's about remembering that you are not defined by who chooses you, but by who you choose. It's about realizing that your worth was never up for debate, only your willingness to enforce it. And once you've embodied this truth, you carry it into every future relationship, every decision, every dream. So where does that leave him? It leaves him with a choice. He can continue on his path, integrating the lessons of your absence and becoming a better man, whether or not that journey leads him back to you. Or he can reach out, humbled and changed, hoping to rebuild something new. Either way, your silence has done its work. It has shifted the dynamic from unconscious patterns to conscious choice. And where does that leave you? It leaves you free. Free to decide, free to choose, free to live. Free to welcome him back if he's done the work, or free to close the chapter and walk into a future that reflects your growth. Free to know with unshakable clarity that you no longer have to settle, chase, or convince. You simply have to stand in your worth and let life meet you there. This is the culmination of the journey you began the day you chose no contact. What started as an act of self-preservation has become an act of self-liberation. What started as an attempt to get his attention has become an awakening to your own power. And in the end, that's the greatest gift the silence can offer. Not the return of someone else, but the return of yourself. By now, the silence is no longer an experiment. It has become a way of life, a boundary that reshaped both of you in profound ways. In the beginning, the focus was on him, on what he would feel, how he would react, whether he would return. But as time unfolded, the true transformation took place within you. You discovered the power of stepping back. You learned that you are not defined by who stays or who leaves, but by the standards you set and uphold. And in that realization, you reclaimed your energy, your time, and your sense of self. This is the quiet revolution of no contact. It begins as an act of restraint and ends as an act of liberation. He, on the other hand, has been walking his own path of reckoning. Without your presence to cushion his life, he has had to confront his own patterns, his own shortcomings, and his own potential. Whether he chooses to rise to meet his better self or remain where he is will determine what happens next. But either way, the silence has done its job. It has held up a mirror. It's worth remembering the words of Carl Jung, who once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This saying fits perfectly here. No contact forces unconscious dynamics into the light. It reveals what was hidden, the patterns of giving and taking, the boundaries crossed and ignored, the needs denied and unmet. Only when these dynamics are seen can they be transformed. This process also reveals something important about you. By refusing to chase, you've broken the old cycle. By holding your boundary, you've taught your nervous system a new lesson. That safety does not come from someone else's approval, but from your own self-trust. This is why you now move differently in the world. With more clarity, more calmness, and more strength. He may come back, humbled and willing to rebuild from a new foundation. Or he may not, but either way, you've already won. You've proven to yourself that you can survive without the person you thought you couldn't live without. You've proven that your life expands when you stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort. And now you stand at a crossroads. From this place, you have options, real options. You can evaluate new relationships with clear eyes. You can build a future rooted in mutual respect, not imbalance. You can choose rather than be chosen. This is the hidden gift of stepping back. It turns hope into choice, and choice into power. As you integrate these lessons, consider what you want for your next chapter. Maybe you want to welcome him back under new terms. Maybe you want to close the chapter completely and open your heart to new people and experiences. Maybe you simply want to savor the self-respect you've cultivated and allow your life to unfold without rushing. Whatever you choose, you're choosing from a place of power. And that changes everything. This is also the moment to deepen your own healing. Journaling, therapy, meditation, new friendships, creative pursuits. These are not just distractions, but pathways to further self-discovery. The more you invest in yourself, the less your worth will hinge on anyone else's behavior. The more you anchor into your own center, the more naturally healthy relationships will flow toward you. If he does return, remember that words alone are not enough. Look for sustained action, consistency, humility, and self-awareness. Look for evidence of growth. Look for alignment with your values. And remember that you have the right to walk away if the energy no longer feels right, even if he seems remorseful. Protecting your peace is not cruelty. It's self-love. If he does not return, know that you have still gained immeasurably. You have gained a stronger relationship with yourself. You have gained the ability to set boundaries without guilt. You have gained clarity about what you want and what you will no longer tolerate. These gains will shape the rest of your life in ways far more valuable than any single relationship. And through it all, you've modeled something powerful for others who might be watching your journey. You've shown that it's possible to step back, to hold your ground, and to transform your pain into power. You've shown that silence can speak louder than words. At its core, this entire journey has not been about him. It has been about you, about your growth, your courage, and your self-discovery. About learning that your worth was never in question, only your willingness to enforce it. About realizing that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in self-respect. And this is where we close this series. Not with a promise that he will come back, not with a fairy tale ending, but with the reality that you are already whole, already worthy, and already capable of building a life that reflects your highest self. Whether he comes back or not, you're free. If this message resonates with you, if you've felt the quiet strength of no contact, if you're navigating the same journey of healing and self-discovery, you're not alone. This is exactly why we created Psych Lens, to explore the deeper layers of human behavior, psychology, and personal growth. Make sure to subscribe to the Psych Lens channel and turn on notifications, so you don't miss future videos. We'll continue diving into topics like boundaries, attachment, self-worth, and the hidden dynamics that shape our relationships. Your journey towards self-awareness and empowerment is just beginning, and we're here to walk it with you. Click subscribe now and join a community of people committed to growth, healing, and understanding. Together, we'll keep uncovering the patterns beneath the surface, because as Carl Jung taught us, only by making the unconscious conscious can we truly change our lives.